Welcome to another episode of the Eric and Mark Show. We haven't recorded an episode in a while. We recently received a letter asking us to cover a few questions about the playground and its spiritual applications. This two-part question couldn't have come at a better time, as today is Good Friday. Why is Good Friday worthy of note in this regard? Because it is the culmination of the greatest act and lesson to all mankind brought to us by the greatest teacher of all time, Jesus Christ. As we've discussed in previous episodes, the bullying that starts on the actual playground manifests itself in the adult realm as well, affecting all human organizations. Organizations, however, aren't the only ones negatively affected by this phenomenon. Societies are too. As we take a look at the Bible, we quickly see how Israelites have been bullied since their existence. At the crux of it all, Israelites found themselves enslaved by Egypt. Slavery is arguably the worst expression of bullying. Getting out of the situation not only took physical battles, but a tremendous amount of faith and hope in God. You see, Mark, the reason why I absolutely love the questions sent in by the listeners is because they allude to the spiritual component often ignored. The reason why I think Jesus is the best example to start from in this regard is because he endured the largest expression of bullying. He was chastised, mocked, beaten, and humiliated, but he always took the high road. This shows us that fighting back physically isn't always the best solution. Jesus taught us that when it comes to facing the odds of oppression, and bullying is a form of oppression, we must look to God's strength and seek his face. And now for the questions. The listener asks, what are some potential responses to the playground from a spiritual or religious standpoint? How can these help us cope? And 2, what are we driven by when it comes to countering the playground and helping people?
Those are some very important points, Eric, and then throughout history, you've had different people in different ethnicities, nationalities, religions, including Muhammad, Gandhi, Moses, people like that, who have experienced similar types of obstacles and have seen the social injustices for themselves. The playground has been in all facets of history, in all walks of life. And I think it's very important for someone to go back to their spiritual center to understand, regardless of who they are or where they're from, to understand how important it is to fall back on that, especially in times where there are challenges. When I was growing up in my own family and I was experiencing bullying as a kid, I had been born in a foreign country. And I didn't really have any kind of spiritual understanding or spiritual center because that country was in Eastern Europe and religion was pretty much outlawed. And it was difficult for me. I didn't really know what to fall back on other than the notion that people were supposed to be good. It was very challenging. And as I grew older, I've never been super religious per se, but I will say that I do believe in God. And I will say that I've looked to God at times of strength. As I'm getting older, as the years are passing, I'm relying more and more and turning to my understanding of God more and more. And I think that's extremely important. Now, for other people, maybe they'll look at something different. Like they'll see energy in the world. They'll go to rainforests in places like South America, and they'll experience things that they don't experience in the other parts of the physical world, in highly urban areas, for example. People will experience different levels of spirituality through kinship with other human beings, through family, through nature, through what they see in places like outer space. Who's to say? I don't denounce any type of science necessarily that's well intended, but who's to say that the stars and the sun and the planets were all one big accident, or mutation? I think there's a lot more to it than that. But regardless of anybody's opinion, anybody's stance, or no matter how religious they are, I really believe that every human being does, and if they don't, they probably should have some kind of spiritual idea to fall back on, something that gets them through, some kind of light. A lot of people talk about seeing light, having light in their lives, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And it's really interesting when you talk about these different religious figures through history, what kinds of different obstacles they may have experienced and what kept them going. What kept them going, and what made them believe that they were on the righteous path. They could keep on going ahead, no matter how much they were scorned, or abused, questioned, any number of things. I admire these people, and I think that they're role models throughout history for us to live by. What do you think about that?
Yeah, those are all valid points. Getting to the question of what are some potential responses to the playground from a spiritual, religious standpoint, I think that what we're getting to is that it is not so much, the religious grandstanding that we're talking about here. We're talking about, as you said, the light, the spiritual side of things. There are ramifications to deciding to act versus deciding not to act, ramifications to deciding to talk or not to talk, who to talk to, how to get your help. I guess the basic understanding of all these leaders is that, some call it leaving it to God, some call it leaving it to nature, but to not make things worse for yourself by thinking you have to fight every battle that comes to you. Sometimes it's more of a spiritual application that you need to summon.
Absolutely, and I think these good books through these different religions, and we're talking about the Bible primarily in this podcast, especially with it being Good Friday. But there's always teachings about, yes, as we say, the idioms or some of the cliches in society, which are very valuable. Know when to pick your battles, and that applies everywhere in the workplace, or which battles to pick. In the workplace and personal relationships, as we've talked about, special interest groups, know when to put up a good fight, an honest fight, and know when to turn away. The truth of the matter is, me with my personality and people on the show and follow our show and yourself know me, I'm kind of a little bit rebellious and combative in a lot of ways. But at the same time, I do have to say I admire people, including myself, when I act a certain way. They're able to just go ahead and just kind of shrug and maybe take it on the chin and move along and learn a valuable lesson. Now, it's not necessarily a good thing to take it on the chin too many times, right? There's only so many lessons that we can get from constantly being exposed to negative treatments. But if we have isolated incidents where we're treated poorly, or where we feel we're treated unfairly, or if we're victimized by social phenomena like the playground, I really believe that there's valuable lessons that can be learned as long as we have ample time to internalize them. Now, that's not to say that anybody's going to go ahead and cater our life lessons to our own expectations and put them on a timer or anything. But if I'm experiencing one tough lesson per hour, that's a lot harder for me, especially as a young child. When I was a young child, that's a lot harder for me to digest than experiencing one tough lesson per week. So I think that tough lessons through life, scattered, we can learn a lot from them, and I think that we learn to take the moral and spiritual high ground. And you've always been great about offering your own insight on that type of thing, and always offering lessons to me and to people that we both know, that we mutually know, to go ahead and say, well, hold on, rethink your angle on this. You've always been good in offering a friendly or well-intended challenge.
Definitely. And, this show has never been against a good sports analogy. Kind of to set the tone for an example, how does this play out in a playground in modern-day society? If we look at Phil Jackson and how he treated Dennis Rodman. I don't know him personally, but just from what you hear in the news and, different media, Dennis Rodman was known, at least in the limelight, as being irreverent, not respecting anybody or anything, doing what he wanted to when he pleased, as he pleased. And if Phil Jackson was not a spiritual person, he would have not gotten past scolding him probably and kicking him off the team. If he had done that, history, as we know, for the Bulls would not have been the same. I don't know if you agree with that or not. In your knowledge of sports history, what do you know about how Phil Jackson took a spiritual approach when he dealt with people such as Dennis Rodman?
Well, at that time especially, I was relying a lot, part of that time was before the internet was very prevalent and that kind of thing, and I was still getting a lot of my news, so to speak, from the mainstream media and the local paper, and the impression that I always got as a guy growing up in the Chicago area about the relationship between Phil Jackson and Dennis Rodman is that Phil Jackson was going to always go ahead and kind of let Dennis be Dennis, but give him kind of like a nice little light tap on the wrist every so often, like, Dennis, hey man, we got to go ahead, let's reel it back in. We're getting a little bit too. I appreciate who you are, but let's go ahead and kind of regroup and let's get back and let's get focused here again. Kind of like, I don't want to say quite treating him with kid gloves, but maybe something along those lines of not wanting to upset him too much or challenge him too much, but at the same time, gently remind him to stay back on track. I think the impression that I had, especially through my high school years and that kind of thing, was that they used the word Zen a lot, and I was like, well, what is Zen? And there was the Zen, references to Buddhism and that kind of thing, and to love, all of God's creations equally, and to all get along and that kind of thing. I kind of had this impression of Phil Jackson as kind of like a high-profile tree hugger. But then at the same time, I don't know how much of that was the media, and how much of that was really just him just finding a spiritual center and truly finding a way to adapt to each type of personality that he was with, because we all know those are huge personalities. Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, I mean, they were absolutely positively ginormous. And I think that Phil just seemed to find a way to split the difference. Again, diplomacy, and my understanding was that he relied a lot on spirituality to probably get some answers. I'm sure he had many a night that he stayed up and prayed to whomever, hoping to try to get some answers. And then he did it, and he was better off for it, and so was the whole team.
Definitely. One of the other components in tandem to all this is in Phil Jackson's spirituality in the Asian philosophy. He spoke a lot about the example of a problem being like a log floating down a stream. And if you choose to battle with that log, in other words, someone's bullying you and you choose to address them and let everything they do bother you, all that does is it makes that log stay around you longer. So something he said he did in an interview I saw that he had was he treated a lot of Rodman's funny or crazy antics as a log going down a stream. And if he could have the wherewithal to just let that log float by, then everything would remain peaceful again. Are there any examples you can probably think of, maybe putting on the spot, hopefully I'm not, where at work or social settings where somebody's maybe pressing your buttons, but you decided to let that log float away down the proverbial stream, so to speak?
Yeah, I've had to do that. I think that especially coming into new work environments several times and that kind of thing, I was like, okay, well, of course I've got my own preferences here and my own ego, and like I said, I have a tendency to be combative and question authority and that kind of thing, but I had to go ahead and do that because I'm like, okay, well, I'm at a new job and I want to make a good impression, and I want to, again, be selective about my battles, or maybe it's a timing thing, maybe me asking a certain questions or making a certain suggestion 3 months in or a month in is a little too early to go ahead and be too opinionated, but maybe I could wait about 6 months or a year and start becoming more outspoken, kind of like I am in my current job. I don't really offer maybe a huge amount of opinions at the outset, but I've been a little bit more opinionated and a little bit more outspoken lately, and I think that I'm earning that to a degree as I go, and as I'm gaining rapport and building a relationship with people. Those are the main places that I can really think of. We did a podcast about, being in a musical group. I think that when I came in, I think that, again, I was kind of a colorful personality and still outspoken, but I think that I listened and I observed a lot and learned from, people like yourself, when in the times that you and I have worked together, and other people that we know, where I'm like, okay, there's some different lessons to learn from everybody. Now, I'll go ahead and, of course, challenge people from time to time and question them from time to time in a without without having any negative intentions, so to speak. But at the same time, I felt like I tried to be very selective as to when I did that. Again, I wasn't perfect. I'm not a model for everybody, but I tried to be selective, and I tried to be liked, and I tried to earn the respect that I got. And I feel like I did that for the most part. But I think that a lot of times when we talk about self-restraint, and still not perfect to this day, still works in progress sometimes, especially when dealing with family and that kind of thing, extended family, sometimes our most initial response to something emotionally is the one that's going to get us into the most trouble. So like if you're taking a Scantron test and they say, oh, hey, if you go ahead and have a certain answer that you think that it might be, an answer to a question on a test, and you erase that and you put something else, and usually you're going to be wrong. Well, in the case of emotions, I think that sometimes it's good to go ahead and hit that pause button. Maybe erase your first response or let it pass, and after that come back with something a little bit more productive, because the reactive way is to go ahead and to be confrontational or to say something impulsive or whatever. I think that sometimes I go ahead, I take a deep breath, and I speak to God. I'm like, God, please help me through this situation. I'm not feeling too well in the moment. I'm struggling, and I feel like in these difficult situations, it's always something to help me fall back on, because thinking about even things like the electromagnetic spectrum, chakras on the human body, which I've studied for a while in a sort of meditation I do, thinking about God, it seems to help me bring me back to my spiritual center. When I don't do it, a lot of the times I get myself into trouble, or I get into conflicted mode. But when I do it and I remember to do it, then I feel like I'm better off in a better place. When I think about nature, the world, I think about love, I think about God, and like I said, I think about the chakras. Then I feel like I'm in a better place when I fall back on those things. They serve as a guide to me. How about yourself? I know that you had some situations where you become probably more spiritual in recent years. I think that you had alluded to times in history where perhaps you believed in God, but then as time went on, your faith in God and in family and in doing the right thing really kind of like strengthened. And I kind of wonder, what was the turning point for you? You seemed like you had some good things happen along the way that just continue to strengthen your belief system.
Definitely, yeah. I pray to God all the time as well. And while it is good sometimes to, as they say, let sleeping dogs lay, there's an actual pretty good Asian philosophy that talks about when a man crosses a river twice, it is neither the same river nor the same man. That alludes to, like, if you look at water going by in a stream, there are molecules. And if you cross it twice, you're not being brushed by the same molecule. And you've also learned a little bit from the first time you crossed it, so you're a different person. If you go to the teachings of Jesus Christ and even the way that David would navigate through battles, we begin to understand that there's something called prioritization of conflict, which basically means that there are certain bigger issues that absolutely must be dealt with now, and other ones that are big issues that must be dealt with prayer. So, for example, when Jesus was going to the synagogue, and he noticed that they were doing business in the synagogue, basically in what he considered the house of the Lord, he resorted to flipping tables and scolding everybody, because that was a major transgression. But flip the script, in almost every other situation, he fixed things by either asking a high-end question, leading by example, or engaging in prayer. So bringing it to the second question of what are we driven by when it comes to countering the playground, which is really what I think our show is about. How do we counter the playground? How do we decide what problem we need to react to right now, because it's basically a big emergency, and what conflicts will be, I guess, enlarged because we take that response versus taking a more calculated response. So if we were to, let's say, go to an actual playground at a school and somebody is facing bullying, what is the context you can maybe think of where they can counter that playground activity through a more calculated, prayerful response versus the proverbial flipping of tables.
Absolutely, and I like what you said about that even he flipped the tables, and I also like what you said about the man with the crossing. It's never the same man and never the same, never the same stream or whatever, the same river, because the molecules are different. They're always moving. They're always moving around, and I really, really like that. I really like that take on things. If you could share, I know it's been a while since we've talked about it. You had mentioned a number of years ago when you were becoming more spiritual, you'd have been talking about your metaphysical army and how you were putting that to work and how that was helping you on sort of like a intellectual and spiritual realm to go ahead and pursue important objectives and fight important battles inside of your mind to keep yourself mentally and spiritually strong. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I always found that metaphysical army thing that you told me about very interesting.
Well, I guess in some, it's not going to be as long of an answer as we may think, and lucky for the audience, we won't bore them to death with that. But it's basically setting the energy right. So when things happen to you that are not to your liking, being able to discern what requires that immediate response and what can stand to be given further thought to be dealt with in a future occasion. I've had some experiences in life where I have had immediate answers to prayer, and I've had others where, like the rest of us, still waiting for the answer. But it's pretty much been for me not dealing with people in kind has kind of helped set up the metaphysical army to where, because everyone hopes for mercy, right? And it's easy to hope for it when you want it, but it's also easy to not give it when people need it. And so it's kind of, in the biblical teaching again, where it says treat others like you want to be treated or love your neighbor like yourself. And so that's another component of, I guess, navigating the playground where, you may realize the person that is taking your lunch money may not be getting fed at home, or the person that is being mean to you may be bullied at home, so you never know what someone's going through. We're not trying to whitewash or excuse what they're doing, but sometimes if you put the shoe in the other foot, sometimes that helps you set up your metaphysical army, so to speak.
Absolutely. And, there's a few points here. There's some good books, and you're in my conversations. I mentioned many times one of my favorites is the Book of Job. Now, the Book of Job is essentially about, and from my angle anyway, I remember when I read the Book of Job, I had taken a world religions course in college. And it was very interesting to me because there's a lot about suffering and about who decides to question God and who decides not to, who retains their faith in God when bad things happen, versus who does not. And the Book of Job is interesting from the standpoint that it kind of like is an extreme, because a guy pretty much went from having everything, seemingly, to having nothing, having everything taken away from him because he was tested as God's humble servants, to having double what he had to begin with. Now that's extremes. That's not usually how life works. We don't usually go from having a lot to nothing and then having double what we had to start with. Even though there are exceptions, of course. We know people who probably at some point were very prominent, in sports and Hollywood, and now that, they're living on the street, for example, Now, or they're homeless, and then maybe they make a comeback or something like that. So it's unfortunate. And the question is at that point, without doing any kind of judgment of moral compass or spiritual compass, I'm curious as to those people who retained their faith in God at that point. If somebody went from, instead of rags to riches, they went from riches to rags, and then eventually came out of it. I've always found that type of thing fascinating. Another thing that comes to mind is that a good friend of ours has said several times. He says he doesn't believe in punishment in life. He believes in lessons and rewards, and I always like that. I always go back to that as one of his statements, because it's like, if you think about it, when we're rewarded, that's a reward, right? As long as we consider it a reward. But when we feel like we're being punished, like, oh, God, why are you doing this to me? Or world, why are you doing this to me? Oh, playground, why are you doing this to me? Those are a lot of lessons involved. And that's pretty tough to go ahead and sell a 5 or a 6-year-old boy or girl getting pushed around on the playground or chastised on the idea that, oh, hey, this is good that this is happening. It's not good that it's happening. And to convince them, oh, hey, these are just some valuable lessons that will benefit you later in life. That's a really tough sell because it hurts, it's painful, and 5 and 6-year-olds onward are still building a moral foundation. But I'll tell you right now, as a middle-aged man, I like to consider myself youthful, but I'm middle-aged in all fairness. As a middle-aged man, I would like to say that I really, really, really wish that back then, when I was an immigrant coming into from another country as a baby, and I was getting pushed around on the playground, both physically and metaphorically in every way, that I understood better about God. I understood better about what to fall back on, and I had that belief that something was going to be better, because at that time I didn't know. I didn't have anybody but my parents. I didn't have the school system. I didn't have anybody to rely on to say, oh, hey, Mark, everything is going to be okay. You've seen the worst of it. It only gets better from here. I didn't have that. I wish that I had that, because if I believed in God at that time and understood what it meant to have God in my life, and what I understood what it was like to believe in the world and believe in good, I would have probably been more like, hey, you know what, this is horrible and I'm upset right now, but it's okay. Pick yourself up, brush yourself off, live to fight another day, because God is looking after me. I really, really wish that I had that. That's why I really encourage people who are listening to our show to bring some level of spirituality, whatever it is, religion or otherwise, to their own children, to their own loved ones. It'll make their lives better. We all need something to believe in, something to keep us going. I certainly wish that I had it as a kid. And I'm sure, Eric, I don't want to speak for you, but when you were having some tough times as a kid, or your kids were having some tough times, I'm sure that God has played an important role as well to help them through that.
Yeah, it's easy to have faith when everything's going for you, but, not from a religious perspective, but from a historic perspective. When you speak about Good Friday, from the perspective of Jesus, you got to wonder, how was it Good Friday? Here's a guy who's getting beaten down, who's getting insulted, spit on, all these different things, which there are historical accounts of that, again, not religiously, but historically. Yet, there was a lesson, there was a purpose. There was a reason why he was going through that. Similarly, when you're getting pushed around the playground, or when you're getting pushed around at work, or pushed around in a hockey match or on the soccer field, there's a reason, meaning not because you deserve it, but there's something to be learned about how to prioritize conflict. If you get, let's say, if you get poke checked in a hockey game and you slam them up against the board, that's not the desire you want, right? Because then you're going to be going to the box, and that hurts your team. So being able to prioritize on, realizing that even though I'm the one suffering in the playground, how are my reactions affecting my family? How are my reactions affecting my friends?
Absolutely. And that's the thing. That's what it comes back to. It comes back to those difficult lessons in a lot of cases. And I really like what you said. It's really easy to keep the faith when everything is going great. But those lessons are very, very important. And I imagine, again, along the way, Jesus Christ, he experienced those lessons and taught those lessons, taught what he learned. And Gandhi and Muhammad and Moses and anybody else that I haven't mentioned, there's always a difficult journey. I've never seen any kind of writings, and I've studied world religion, about any kind of religious figure say, hey, started out, the coast was clear, everything was smooth, and made it to the finish line, and enjoyed a cold drink at the end. It was never like that. It was always tough along the way. There was always trials, always tribulations, and always strong people who kept their faith that are there to inspire us all. So I really like it when people have some form of spirituality, some form of religion in their lives. I think it's a better way to live. I'm not a preacher by any means whatsoever, but speaking personally, it's made my life better in many ways. I still feel like I get stung by the most painful of lessons to this day, and I get rewarded by the most amazing things. Even tonight, I've had a tough week, but just some amazing rewards even tonight. and including this podcast, there's a reward. Doing this with you, with a good friend of mine. And it seems like it goes to the extreme sometimes, and there's some tough weeks, but there's definitely lessons to learn from all of this. I think we're always learning. I always thought as a kid, somebody will be middle-aged, they'll be in their 30s, 40s, 50s. They're already done learning, there already has been. I still learn every single day. Every single day I learn something new about myself, about the world. I'm always learning, and like I said, I always have some level of a relationship with God to fall back on, and I would encourage other people to do the same, especially if they have kids that are experiencing bullying, or if they are young people who are trying to get into the workplace, make a name for themselves, experiencing the playground phenomenon where somebody else is getting promoted instead of them, or they're in special interest groups, so they're pursuing something that's important to them, competitive or heartfelt or whatever, and they're being overlooked. It's very, very important, I think, to help them build and guide them towards a spiritual center. Because if they go astray, bad things can happen, and it'll make their lives worse. And I really believe that we should try to encourage them, not to necessarily be religious, not necessarily attend some kind of, a church or temple or whatever else, every day or week, even though that's not a bad thing. But to go ahead and always have an understanding of the universe, always have an understanding of nature, always find good and see good in other people and animals, that kind of thing. How beautiful even the interactions are in the animal kingdom and that kind of thing. Those kinds of things are really things that make it a joy to be alive. And I think that's something that even the toughest of times, it's always great to have something to fall back on. And spirituality just provides so much strength in the most turbulent of times. I don't know where I would be if I didn't have God and faith in my life, that's for sure.
Likewise. So if we can maybe paddle our boat out of the deep waters we've navigated in and enter the shallow, where listening audience can have a few takeaways they can apply, even though you were kind of doing that, what would be some of the takeaways? What does spirituality have to do with the playground?
I'm glad that you asked that, because that was going to actually go into some of the next points, is that kind of like with this podcast, what motivates us to do this podcast. So, we know that people, and I'll speak very bluntly, I'll speak frankly, people who have hundreds of thousands or millions of views on YouTube and that kind of thing, they can make a living and that kind of thing. You and I are both fathers, we're family men, and we have full-time jobs and that kind of thing. And the main thing that this podcast, I think, offers both of us, but I'll speak for myself primarily, is a way to connect with others in every way, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, And we're going to have some really important guests coming up on our show, in the next little while, and they'll speak from their own angle as well. I'll get more on that later. But I think that it provides that kinship. It's that willingness to go ahead and to help people. I think that if people are doing something in this realm, it's the primary motivation is financial. I think that they'll never get there, because this is not a marketable happy hour kind of podcast. Yes, of course, people can go in and have fun, and they can share jokes, and you and I have sense of humor as well. But we're talking about very serious things here. We're talking about very serious things in terms of the playground phenomenon, social injustices, and I think that people are the real reason why we're involved in this. People, including ourselves, the kinship we share with each other, the kinship we share with our families, or the like-minded people who have faced some of the same challenges that we have. Maybe we could go ahead and talk to members of our audience and find out what they've done to help their children when they experienced difficult things in these times. But again, just what we're driven by. I think that God has reassured me for myself that this podcast is that we're doing our show is part of my calling, part of our calling, and like I said, just the desire to connect and to help others, and for others to help me and to guide me as well. How about for yourself?
Definitely, the component of help is definitely the most prevalent here. Again, not preaching and not turning this into a religious session, but as one of the ultimate examples of what we're talking about here, of not doing things for money, is found in Matthew 6:33. It says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." I don't claim to be a theologian or a scholar in that realm, but basically my interpretation of that and the kingdom of God is basically, what is right? Is it right to mistreat others? Is it right to rip others off? Is it right to not help others that you can help when you have the power to do so? The answer is no, it's not. So when you do the right things, when you try and help others, even, we don't have perfect lives, and here we are giving people advice on how to improve theirs. That's really, I think, what spirituality boils down to. Getting above your flesh and bones and realizing that you have gifts that make room for you and you have a say in people's future. And it's nice to know that what these people sacrificed for, even though they may not have received the benefits, all the people that can learn from their examples do.
Absolutely. And I think about an analogy when it comes to religion, like you have 100, if you have 100 people in the same dwelling, and they've fallen upon hard times. There's only 100, let's say, pounds of food to go ahead and spread between these 100 people over the span of a week. That means 1 pound of food per person per week on average. Would you want the other 99 people that you're with to be people who believe in God and believe in doing the right thing and at least check in with a certain moral compass? Or would you rather be with people who don't believe in anything at all other than survival in the physical material world and don't believe in any kind of spiritual consequence? I would much rather go ahead and starve and ration myself with 99 other people who are wholesome and believe in God and believe in doing the right things than 99 others who believe in nothing at all. Now, that's not to say people who are atheist or agnostic can't be good people. Maybe their moral compass is going to be, on some level, even more prominent than somebody who believes in a specific God or whatever. But at the same time, I'd rather go ahead and take my chances with 99 other spiritual people at a time of crisis than 99 people who believe in nothing but survival. That's how I feel about it.
100%.
So final thoughts, I think that to the first point is the importance of spirituality in our lives, again, whatever form that spirituality takes, and it's important to relate it to our loved ones, namely to our children, because if they grow up with it, they'll have better lives. Again, it's not talking about what to believe or who to believe in or anything, but some form of spirituality is also a good thing. Another thing is when you're doing a show like this, for the second point that I'm trying to make, you're doing a show like this, you're doing it because of people, like I said. You're doing it because you're getting something from people and they're getting something from you. And I think it's for myself anyway, it's inappropriate to be driven by something material or financial, something in the physical world. This is much more about connection, about energy, about teaching, and about learning. That's where I'm at. So those are my final thoughts. How about you, Eric?
Yeah, so I like what you said about being all connected. Those that go through conflict and are kind of stagnant and can't see past themselves and believe it's only about them, and so they feel alone and they don't reach out because they don't think anybody can help them. But part of spirituality is realizing you're not alone, realizing that there is a collective, that there are people that have gone before you that have gone through a lot worse and that have probably found ways of navigating what you're going through currently. And really the only way to connect with that solution is to reach out to the spirituality. So, again, this show is about helping people. We're not people that don't need help ourselves, but we also are people, I believe, that are reflective and have been gifted with the powers of such things as discernment and logic, and we're able to figure things out, and hopefully what we figured out can help others at least shed a light on what they're going through, and that there's hope and that they're not alone.
Absolutely. Amen to that. On that note, bless you and your whole family, my friend, all of your loved ones, all the people that make a difference in your life, and bless all of our listeners and their loved ones, all the people that make a difference in their lives. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe. share the love, and we're going to continue doing what we're doing for you. We'll be there for you. We hope that you're there for us too. We'll talk to you in the future. Take care.
I second that motion. And don't forget, reach out with questions to ericandmarkshow@gmail.com.